All right, everybody. Stocks by the numbers. Welcome back. Centrus Energy Corporation, ticker symbol LEU, listed here on the ARCA. Stock closed 64.30, up 4.5 points, roughly 7.5% here on the day. Stock closed though after hours. Well, excuse me, it hasn't closed, but it continues to run after hours. It's up now to about 65.5, up another point and almost 2% more on the day. Now, first of all, a couple of things. First of all, on the technical side, we looked at this stock back here on August 27th, right here where this white arrow is. Stock was 39.47. I said, in my opinion, let me back up. I said that we have this kind of longer term symmetrical triangle. We looked at the numbers as well, a lot of the fundamentals, and I said, in my opinion, the juice is worth the squeeze, the risk is worth the reward. I thought this move was going to happen over the next 3 to 6 months, kind of rallying off of maybe potential good earnings and also any favorable outcome that we can hear after elections, because that's basically when the company was reporting earnings, as you see, the first week of November, right around election day. So I was expecting kind of this run up here going into the elections, and then maybe we can break out on some good news. But apparently we had a premature breakout, as you see. Stock is up like 50-60% from when we looked at it just about 4 or 5 weeks ago. And we had some positive news come out on LEU, so let's get into it. But also, I wanted to say on the technical side, I did mention, if you go back and you watch the video that I posted a few weeks ago when we spoke about this initially, I did say that because of previous candles that broke the pattern here, as you see, these couple of instances here, I said that in my opinion, you can potentially see a flash crash down out of this triangle to potentially scare out some investors and some traders. I was looking for a retest maybe to like a moving average. I think we were talking like the low 37s. Stock ended up dropping all the way down here, retesting this fib, 34.91. You can see that's the low, top left of the screen. And then I said it'll most likely, if it does flash crash and it does break down, I said in my opinion, you shouldn't get too scared out because it'll most likely reclaim that triangle. And I was looking for even like the mid 40s conservatively. So we were talking about like a 10-15% gain. And then of course, if earnings came out good, maybe you could have seen this 60 plus number in the numbers, in the fundamentals themselves, right? But again, let's go to the news that actually caused this breakout. So first of all, we had news yesterday. We have the CEO of Nvidia basically saying that endorses nuclear energy to meet the surging electricity demands posed by AI. AI's energy consumption could rival that of a small country within just 3 years. Called nuclear power, quote, a wonderful way forward for sustaining AI data centers, emphasizing the need for diverse, sustainable energy sources. Also, we heard Microsoft basically planning to reopen 3 Mile Island, which in my opinion, they really should have never shut down, but that's a conversation for a different day. Energy demands, yep, expansion of AI, okay, beautiful. But what initially led the breakout was this multi-billion-dollar deal, here we go, from Korea Hydro and Nuclear Power. So as we see here, Centrus announced that it inked a contingent supply agreement with Korea Hydro and Nuclear Power for a decade of low-enriched uranium deliveries to feed Korea's reactors. The deal made a significant step forward in the company's efforts to deploy uranium enrichment capacity at its American centrifuge plant in Ohio. The latest commitment brings the total contingent sales commitments to $1.8 billion, demonstrating strong private sector support for the establishment of an alternate low-enriched uranium supply source. So this is why also I was initially speaking just on the broader picture of the company itself. And again, because we're in election year, and it seems like right now that Trump is kind of the front runner, we were talking about how he is kind of big on energy, right? He wants to start drilling again, and he's spoken about nuclear and other forms of energy to make us energy independent again. And that's why, he was saying, we do that and we'll lower the cost of energy, and that should lower the cost of everything across the board. But we were also talking about the DOE potentially kind of earmarking a couple of billion for some of these uranium enrichment plants and companies, right? And we were saying that even if LEU just got a small piece of that, that would obviously be huge and the stock would start to move. But anyway, we got this news of this decade-long deal basically coming out of Korea Hydro and Nuclear Power. So obviously, that was phenomenal news, big deals, and of course, consistent business over roughly the next 10 years, right? And it says here that with this deal, Centrus now secured a large amount of funds to develop a factory. It intends to expand the factory by adding centrifuges for large-scale production of low-enriched uranium and high-assay low-enriched uranium for advanced reactors. Centrus has also applied for federal funds to enable the deployment of domestic uranium enrichment facilities, with the U.S. Congress allocating $3.4 billion to this initiative. The company's accomplishment demonstrates the value of public-private collaborations in advancing vital infrastructure and energy security. We were talking about this as well, right? Just like when we look at stocks like LAC, Lithium Americas. We know that we're still going to have demand and use for lithium. And what we're seeing now is a lot of potential turmoil kind of percolating overseas. Whether it's in Europe, whether it's Far East and Asia, we don't know exactly what's going to happen. So this is why I feel now you're starting to see the shift even over the last year or two, and probably over the next 2, 3, 4 years, especially in my opinion, if we get Trump back in, you're going to start to see the shift back to American made, American manufactured, American supplied, American materials, right? This is why I said that when we heard news of like the U.S. Steel deal taking place with the buyout from Japan's Nippon Steel, I said, in my opinion, it shouldn't go through. It most likely won't go through. I personally wouldn't put it through. And we have to keep our steel, our lumber, we have to keep all these things domestic. We get a chunk of our lithium imported from China. Now we're talking about, again, 2.5 billion, whatever the number, whatever the exact figure was, from the DOE to LAC, for them to build out their facility and get the mining up and running. I know that, I think they said that's more of a longer term play. I think 2026 was the time frame. But again, you see my point. The talks about Intel, right? Intel reinvesting here into kind of American manufacturing and American facilities. So you're kind of starting to see the resurgence of, again, American made and American materials, which is why I said, even when I started the channel roughly 2 years ago, I was saying that, in my opinion, you know, buy these material companies. We're going to need these materials. And of course, with hyperinflation, all that's going to go up in value and whatnot, yada, yada, yada. But also, again, I know we're talking about energy, but I feel that really, we were saying also that even if Harris would happen to become president, they're also, you know, very green and whatnot, right? So we know we were kind of in a win-win situation, if you will, right? Because now it kind of seems like, regardless of who may win, this may be a stock to own because it's alternative, you know, greener energy. Obviously, there's demand for it. Again, Nvidia CEO coming out saying thinks it's a phenomenal option. And we're probably going to need it based off the surging demand for AI. So you're kind of in the perfect spot right here with something like an LEU, right? Because you're probably more than likely going to continue to get orders based on the increasing demand, but also at the same time, you may potentially get a chunk of change coming from Congress. But overall, again, even blocking out all the noise, that's why I like fundamentals, because even without looking at, you know, this deal that came in, obviously, a couple of weeks after we looked at it, even without saying, oh, they might get, you know, 200 or 300 million from Congress. I mean, all of that is nice. But putting all of that aside, that's why I like fundamentals, because we looked at the fundamentals. I looked at how I personally look at the fair value of a business. And that's why I said, in my opinion, over the next 3 to 6 months, you could have seen a breakout of the triangle, and we could have seen $50, $60 a share, almost no problem. And again, it happened a little prematurely, but the company did technically receive some really good news on that deal out of Korea. So obviously, we re-mention it again. Signed deal for low-enriched uranium supply. And that's basically where we looked at it. So that is the news to come out on LEU. And it just so happened to come out before earnings. It took place a little bit ahead of schedule, because again, I was looking for at least a couple of months maybe before we would climb and break out again off the earnings, and we'd get back to the 50s and the 60s. But apparently, the company had different plans here. and we get the news of the deal. And again, you have the Nvidia CEO basically saying that he's in full support of low enriched uranium and nuclear energy. So that just sent the stock flying on the up and up. But let's look at the numbers now, actually, after this big run up. So now we have a market cap of about $1 billion. We're only trading about 10 times earnings, even after this run up. I think we were at about like 6.5 or something when we looked at the stock. The EPS has been beating more times than not, 3 beats over the last 4 years. Revenue and profit margins have steadily been stepping up and climbing over the years. We got up above 300 million back for 2023. 320 million net income, 84. If we add those numbers up, we're at about 400 million. Let's check this out now. The debt was coming down. Cash has been steadily climbing now. It's a touch over $250 million, 257 million. Debt right now, 171 million. So the cash outweighs the debt by roughly 80 million. So we had a 400 million figure here. And then if we add our excess cash, now we're at 480 million. We have assets outweighing liabilities in the short term, and we have the opposite in the long term. But we do now have positive equity of roughly 76.5 million, we'll call it. So this was 400 million with revenue and profits, again, for last year, not even moving forward. But for last year, we have positive numbers here of about 400 million. We have cash outweighing debt by about 80 million. So we add that. Now we're up to 480 million. And we have positive equity of 76.5 million. So we add that. Now we're at like 550, 560 million. And if we look at the market cap, 1.05. So we're still technically, even after this 50-60% run that we've seen over the last couple of weeks, we are actually still trading, in my opinion, less than 2 times quote-unquote fair value. And now, even after this run-up and this current valuation, first of all, you can probably easily get to 1.2 or 1.3, in my opinion. And that would be, wow, brain fart. That would be at least like another 15-20% from this level. So probably that could potentially take us to north of 70-75 a share. And then of course, because it ran so much so fast, now the word is out. And even though these people, we kind of like to call them Johnny come latelys in my opinion, but the important thing is even the simple common sense sayings and expressions that traders use, like the trend is your friend, follow the vibe, follow the flow. I mean, even if you bought this a day or two ago, obviously you're up big. Right? So sometimes you might hear about it late, but if it's still going to move, then you got to jump in, you got to be a part of it. But stock hit new 52-week highs, 65.44. In my opinion, again, it's going to go higher more than likely. I'm looking for now 70 plus. And now on this breakout, you had the news come out of the decade-long supply now to Korea hydro and nuclear. So that just adds even more value. So that's why now, in my opinion, I know I was looking for 1.2, 1.3 billion. I mean, now you can probably, obviously, in my opinion, you could easily value this north of 1.5 billion, in my opinion, which would be roughly almost another 40-50% move from these current levels, which could potentially bring us up to above 90 plus. Now, off of this hype and off this recent news, it can just keep going and run back up there, right? And we can see even getting back to the top end of the range that kind of started the symmetrical triangle when we started to pull back the tail end of 2021. You can see that's at like high 88s, around $89 a share, right? So we may potentially retest those highs, but if they beat earnings, and then, of course, if the markets like who wins the election, and then obviously if we get news that LEU gets a chunk of that money from Congress, or we hear news that they sign another deal, that is why I'm saying you may really see 80, 90 much, much faster than you may realize. And it's really crazy how quick a situation can take place and can happen for you, because again, just a couple of weeks ago, stock was sub 40. Now it's at 65. So these moves happen quickly. And I understand the deal came out a while back, and you guys feel I'm coming to you late with the news, and you knew about that already. But remember, I mean, in all fairness, in my defense, we didn't know about this decade-long deal. We didn't have Nvidia CEO come out and support nuclear. I just looked at the company, I looked at the big picture, I looked at the long term, and I said at 39.5, in my opinion, I would be a buyer. And the stock right now is above 65. So regardless of how you want to look at it or the time frame in which how quickly it happened, at the end of the day, a win is a win. But now we have to look over at stock charts, because even though people are going to continue to buy into the hype, chances are most people are going to try to wait for a dip, right? So we had this massive spike up, and you can see the Bollinger Band just completely trumpeted out. And now we closed above the top Bollinger Band with the RSI on the daily sitting at 80.5. It had a dip down to the low 70s and then spiked up 7.5% today. So in my opinion, it's probably time to slow down and catch our breath a little bit. But I do still say, as I laid out, you're probably going to see 70 plus, if not 80 plus, sometime soon. But you can also see on the weekly time frame as well, the RSI has now potentially topped out at about 69.5. Now, we've had times where we approached that benchmark and kind of continued upward. So we may spike straight up again another 7, 8, 10%, 270 plus, and then we can start breathing and pulling back. But overall, in my opinion, it probably should sell off a little bit. But in my defense, unless the markets really start to sell off and just pull everything across the board down with it, then chances are, even buying here in the 60s, in my eyes, you're probably still, you still stand to make a pretty decent profit. We had the MACD obviously cross to the upside here on this big news. You can see the stock ran up, got right to the 50-day, and then opened the following week right there at the 50-day and had a big explosion and bounced up. Let me look at the MACD actually on the daily. Yeah, we're just on the up and up now. This is basically, yeah, when the news came out, it was like the 11th or 12th, and we had the MACD cross, and boom, we were on the up and up. So really, really good call here with LEU. But now, of course, even if we run up to 70s or the 80s or whatever, if, of course, these earnings are light, the stock is going to pull back in the short term. You need to understand that as well. But let's look at the pivot points real quick. Nope. Let's look at the pivot points real quick. And we can see that the next resistance level on the weekly is 68.88. And hypothetically, if we continue to ride this wave and volume continues to pile in off this recent news, you can see previous resistance level of around 76, it looks like. So that's why I was looking for maybe the mid 70s as well on the next stop. But we closed just slightly above this resistance. Look at this resistance level right here, 64.12. Stock closed at 64.30, and of course is continuing upward after hours. Let's see how it looks in extended hours, actually. Yeah, very light volume, very little pop here. But this is why, again, we may be due for a little bit of a rejection and a little bit of a pullback, maybe to the mid-high 50s. But overall, in my opinion, I think we all could potentially see the writing on the wall. And now, of course, since just in a few weeks, the stock went from sub 40 to mid 60s. Now, I'm sure a lot of you who may have missed the ride are now throwing this on your watch list, or you may have jumped into it. So even though it did run a lot, if you did jump in late, you know I'm pulling for you. I hope everything works out. And I just wanted to switch over to FinViz because I know everyone tracks short interest now. So according to FinViz right now, we still have a short float of about 12.7%. Unknowing really, how accurate these numbers are after this recent pop. But as of right now, we can call it about 12, 13%. So this is why, again, you could maybe have a run-up to that weekly resistance at the high 68s, and then you can start to pull back and start to come back down to earth, which would be roughly about, what's that, like 3 points. So, yeah, maybe like another 5-ish% move from the mid-60 level, and then maybe it starts to reject and pull back. But overall, we looked at the numbers, and I personally like it. And it happened prematurely, but again, this is why I say, even if you're buying something and oh, I'm not going to touch it. I don't want to look at it for 3 years. I can appreciate that kind of way of thinking, because almost you don't want to see anything bad. You don't want to see it not doing anything, because then you may potentially kind of talk yourself out of it and hit the sell button before you should. And I can appreciate that. But as I always said, even if you're buying something like a Hershey or an IBM and you're tucking it away for years, you really should make it your business to stay up to date with any news that comes out on the company. You really should keep an eye on the earnings that are reported to see how's their profitability. Is revenue steadily growing? Did they just miss, a low estimate that everyone thought was going to be a layup and they, missed by a mile? Should I have concerns now moving forward over the next couple of quarters? Right. So this is why, even if you're doing a long-term hold, you should keep an eye on a stock, because you never know when news can hit. And again, we had a premature breakout, stock up north of 50% on the news of the Nvidia CEO, obviously saying he supports nuclear. And of course, we had the decade-long deal now with Korea hydro and nuclear power. So a situation can change at a moment's notice. And something that you may have been hesitant, maybe you didn't really see it down here at 40, sub 40. Well, now it's at mid 60s. So now you have to reevaluate your situation, right? But again, this is why information is key and you have to keep an eye on everything. But moral of the story, I have to say, without hearing any of this recent news, I said, in my opinion, it looked good in the numbers at sub 40, and now it's at mid 60. This is why, again, similar to what you heard in the movie Moneyball, right, where they tap that guy, the mathematician, to he wasn't looking at baseball as a sport, and he wasn't really like analyzing the way the players play and who's clutch, who's a good fielder and whatnot. He just went straight to the numbers, and he was looking at runs scored, runs batted in, what's their on base percentage, right? How often do they walk? How often do they get hits? And he just cut through all the nonsense and just looked solely at the numbers. And it's funny because you see it now with your own eyes. This is why I like to look at fundamentals, because whether this happened over 4 weeks or whether it happened over 4 months, in my opinion, I was extremely confident that it almost inevitably was going to happen. And the fact that it happened quicker than we thought obviously just makes the situation that much better. But again, in the numbers, I said I'm looking for at least 60, if not 70. And here we go. The stock's at 65. So do with that information what you will. But that's it. I'll end it there. Once again, Stocks by the Numbers. I want to thank you for stopping by. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, drop it down in the comments section. I'm usually pretty quick to reply. Thumbs up algorithm helps me get more eyes on the channel. And of course, subscribe to the channel. That is our handshake agreement. That is how you help me help you. But more importantly, moving forward, like I always say, I understand that markets are rocky, they're volatile, and they're very uncertain. So I want to wish all of you success. I hope everyone makes a couple of dollars. Thank you for your time. Have a good day.